The CEO invited me to lunch just to let me know they were replacing me with the owner's nephew. That's the way these things go, right? I smiled, nodded, and told him I understood. No one in that restaurant realized I'd seen this coming for months. The writing scrawled across the server logs, and in every closed-door meeting I stopped being invited to. I'm Derek, 42 years old, and for the last 11 years, I've been the backbone of Rivet Manufacturing's IT department. Even if you wouldn't guess it glancing at our company website, I built our network security from the ground up back when half the staff still scrawled passwords on sticky notes, and Windows XP was the only operating system anyone knew. I took a tiny, overwhelmed 5-person help desk and built it out into a 30-person operation, supporting 3 production facilities that never slept. The machines in Milwaukee ran around the clock, and so did I in one way or another. What's strange is I never expected to stay this long. The job was a stopgap, something to keep me moving after my divorce, a way to fill the silence while I figure out what my life was supposed to look like after everything changed. Funny how loss can become a kind of momentum. Turns out I was good to work. I could see how everything connected. The networks, the people, even the rhythms of the machines. At some point, all those servers and switches started to feel like they belonged to me. Not in any legal sense, but in the way you claim responsibility for something that would otherwise fall apart. Lunch was at Maxwell's, a place with white tablecloths and hush servers, where you go to impress a client or close a deal. Not the kind of place you go to fire someone. But appearances have always mattered to Preston Campbell, our CEO. He cut into a steak and told me, "Derek, you've been invaluable, but we need fresh perspectives. Someone who sees where tech is going. That executive speak for. We found someone who costs less, someone who won't push back in meetings." Harrison's nephew just minted from MIT, supposedly a whiz at digital transformation. I wondered if he'd ever spent a night on the floor, coaxing a dying server back to life, or if he even knew how to read a log file. I just nodded and sipped my water. Who's handling the transition? I asked, keeping my voice even. Preston's relief was almost palpable. He didn't want a scene, and I had no interest in giving him one. "You'll have 6 weeks," he said. "We'll announce it after the quarterly all hands." He slid over an NDA before dessert, and I signed it without a word. I shook his hand, told him I understood. Business is business, after all. But as I left, I couldn't help but wonder if he really believed it, or if he just needed to hear me say it. Back at my desk, my admin credentials were already stripped down. My name had vanished from the leadership email thread. The decision had been made long before lunch. I could almost trace the timeline. Meetings I was left out of, projects reassigned, the consultant who came through just to take stock. I'd sensed the shift for weeks, maybe months, but seeing it play out in real time still stung. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Not just because I was angry, though I was in a slow-burning kind of way, and not even because I was worried about finding a new job. IT is a small world, and good people are always in demand, especially those who can keep an operation running through storms and cyber attacks. No, what kept me awake was something else, a pattern of strange access attempts I'd seen in the server logs 3 months back. A cluster of login attempts from an internal IP on the executive floor, poking into systems no one up there should know existed. They'd been digging through my documentation, my disaster recovery plans, my notes on legacy code. It wasn't just about replacing me. They wanted to siphon off everything I knew before I walked out the door, to make my exit as painless for them as possible. 16 years ago, I moved to Milwaukee for Ellie. She'd gotten into grad school here, and I left a perfectly good security job in Minneapolis to follow her. We were young, optimistic, maybe a little naive. I figured I'd find my feet. For a while, we built a life. First apartment, new friends, late-night talks about the future. Then, 7 years in, I came home to papers on the kitchen counter and the kind of conversation that leaves you hollow for months. "We want different things," she said. There wasn't a big fight, no blow-up, just an ending, quiet and complete. When Riverton hired me, I was sleeping on my brother's couch, living out a duffel bag in a spare room. The company had just been slammed by ransomware. Systems locked, operations frozen, everyone panicking. They needed someone who could get them up and running, someone who wouldn't blink at chaos. I saw an opening. They knew machines, not computers. Everything was precarious. Outdated systems, patchwork fixes, no real backups. I pitched Preston on a total overhaul, a 5-year plan to modernize everything. He surprised me by saying yes. For 3 years, I barely saw daylight. I rebuilt the network from the ground up, trained staff who'd never touched a command line, set up redundancy and backups. When the Northeast blackout hit, we were the only facility in the region still humming. That got the board's attention. Suddenly, I was being invited to meetings that mattered, my budget tripled, and I was hiring a team: Vanessa with her sharp instincts, Luis who could write code in his sleep, and a dozen others who bought into the vision. We didn't just keep the lights on, we kept the company alive. I remember the Christmas party in 2019. Harrison Wells, the owner, shook my hand and clapped me on the back. You turned us into a modern operation. We couldn't have expanded without you. For the first time in years, I felt like what I did mattered. I let myself think I'd finally found a place where I belonged, where my work was recognized. But nothing lasts forever. The first crack appeared last September, subtle at first. A consultant showed up without warning to audit our digital systems, asking clumsy questions about architecture only I understood. When I pressed him, he dropped the executive team's names and changed the subject. Then one morning, my access to board meeting minutes disappeared. Server cleanup was the excuse. In December, Preston started canceling our weekly check-ins, always apologetic, always busy with something else. At the leadership retreat in January, I overheard Harrison boasting about his nephew's graduation. Brilliant kid, Silicon Valley companies lining up, he said, pride and ambition in his voice. I should have paid more attention. The last sign came when Vanessa mentioned a meeting, one I hadn't been invited to, even though it was about systems I'd designed. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself they were just getting more independent. In reality, the transition was already underway, and I was the last to know. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to miss the slow erosion of trust. You get used to being the person everyone relies on, the one who solves the problems no one else can see. It becomes your identity, something you believe can't be taken away. But in a company like Riverton, loyalty only goes as far as the next quarterly report. They'll shake your hand, thank you for your service, and then hand the keys to someone new, someone with a fresh diploma and the right last name. Still, I can't help but feel a strange sense of pride. I took a broken system and made it resilient. I built a team that knew how to handle anything, and I left behind the kind of infrastructure that will keep running even after I'm gone. They can dig through my documentation and study my backups, but they'll never understand the late nights, the gut decisions, the moments when everything depended on getting it right. That's the part you can't write down, the part they'll never really own. Now, as I pack up my office and hand over my badge, I'm not sure what comes next. But I know this. I've rebuilt my life before. I can do it again. And somewhere out there, there's another company that needs someone who can see what's come before it arrives. Someone who understands that the real job isn't just keeping the machines running, but making sure the people behind them have a fighting chance. She got invited to a strategic planning session, the kind of meeting that, not so long ago, would have landed squarely on my calendar, with me at the head of the table. I used to run those sessions. Now it was her. When she mentioned my name in passing, Preston just pivoted, changed the subject so smoothly it was almost practiced. She told me later, her voice uneasy, that it felt off, like the room was shifting around me, designing blueprints for a future I wasn't supposed to see. I shrugged it off in front of her, but the truth is, it stung. Loyalty had always been my thing, my compass. At least that's what my ex used to say, before she decided loyalty wasn't enough. 2 days after that awkward lunch, I found myself alone in the server room at 7 in the evening. The office had emptied out. Lights dimmed everywhere except here, where the soft of the machines created a kind of sanctuary. The blinking LEDs, the steady thrum of the cooling fans, the neatly labeled racks. I'd chosen every part, sweated every detail, built redundancy into redundancy. This was my world, a world that had quietly grown up around me over 11 long years. So many late nights spent chasing down bugs, rolling out updates, celebrating tiny victories nobody else ever saw. I ran my hand along the main console, feeling the cool metal. These servers carried my fingerprints, my late-night coffee stains, my sense of order. 11 years, and more of my life in this room than anywhere else. This place had become proof of my value, my legacy. Or so I thought. I turned and saw Nathan Blake, Harrison's nephew, lingering in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway lights. He was every inch the new guard. Tailored suit, easy confidence, that restless energy of someone who'd never had to wait for anything. Couldn't have been more than 30, sharp haircut, shoes that probably cost more than my first car. Just doing routine checks. I said, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't already bracing for whatever was coming. You need something? Getting the lay of the land, he replied, stepping in without hesitation. Preston said you'd show me around soon. He did. I kept my tone flat, even as I watched him survey the room with a kind of detached curiosity. Impressive setup, he said after a moment, nodding at the racks. A little old school, but solid. Old school. I'd overhauled every major system 8 months ago, but apparently, in Nathan's world, anything that wasn't running on the bleeding edge was old news. I gritted my teeth. Your documentation's thorough, he continued, almost as if he was paying me a compliment. I've been going through your protocols. I've got some ideas for modernization. He said it like he was offering me a favor, not a replacement. Looking forward to hearing them, I said, forcing a smile. The words tasted dry, brittle, like chalk. When he finally left, I sat down at my workstation, hands shaking a little. I pulled up the access logs, needing to see what I already suspected. Nathan's credentials had been created 3 weeks before that lunch with Preston. He already had top-level admin access, full visibility, full control. He'd read all my documentation, poked through my systems. I felt the old, familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, but underneath it was a sharper, colder clarity. I picked up my phone and texted Luis. Can you meet tomorrow before work? Coffee at Joe's. 6:30. That night, I drove out to the lakefront, to the spot where Ellie and I used to sit and watch the sky turn gold and then purple over the water. Now, the lake was black, the sky heavy with winter, and the cold seeped into the car's interior. I thought about the day Preston handed me the director title, how he clapped me on the shoulder and said, You're the backbone of this place, Derek. We couldn't run without you. I'd believed him. I'd made my life out of being necessary, out of solving problems nobody else could see. But all along, the company had been changing, evolving past me. Backbones, it turned out, were just another part to be swapped out when the next upgrade rolled in. Luis was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, nursing a cup, dark circles under his eyes. He saw me come in and gave a little nod, like he already knew what this was about. They're phasing me out, I said, sitting down across from him. He didn't look surprised. I figured. They've been asking me weird questions, making me walk them through your systems, explain the details. How long has this been going on? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Couple weeks now, he admitted, staring down into his coffee. I'm sorry, man. I should have told you sooner. I shook my head. I couldn't blame him. Luis had a family, a mortgage, responsibilities I couldn't ask him to risk. What's your plan? He asked, voice low. I realized, as he said it, that I hadn't even thought that far ahead. But watching the morning commuter stream past the windows, the city waking up without me, something inside me clicked into place. A kind of resolve I hadn't felt since the day Ellie left that envelope on the kitchen table. They think everything's in the documentation, I said. But we both know it's not. Luis leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. The proprietary tools, the workarounds, all the stuff you build on your own. I nodded. The patches I'd written at midnight, the custom monitoring tools, the client interface that only made sense to me, the shortcuts that kept the system running when official protocols failed. None of it was in the manuals. They had the skeleton, sure, but I kept the soul to myself. Derek, I'm not sabotaging anything. I said, more for myself than for him. But I'm not about to just hand over everything I built. Not when they're treating me like this. Louis studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He understood. We'd spent too many nights troubleshooting together for him not to get it. I need copies of everything I built myself, I said quietly. And I need to know who's still loyal, who's not just going to roll over for Nathan. He nodded. I'm serious. I'll see what I can find out. The official announcement came the following week at the All Hands. Preston stood at the podium, his voice polished and upbeat, talking about exciting transitions and fresh perspectives, like we were all on the cusp of some grand adventure. Nathan stood next to him, smiling at all the right moments, every inch the heir apparent. Derek has been instrumental in building our IT infrastructure, Preston said, not looking at me. And we're grateful for his contributions as he helps us transition to Nathan's leadership over the next 6 weeks. Murmurs spread like static through the room. Most of the IT team looked blindsided. A few stare at me in silent disbelief. Vanessa caught my gaze from across the rows of seats, her eyes wide, searching for answers. I gave her the smallest of nods. I'm still here for now. After the meeting, I asked for a sit-down with Preston and HR. I was calm, methodical. I pointed out, in detail, that several of the systems Nathan was about to inherit weren't just company property. I'd built them outside regular work hours, using my own development framework, sometimes even on my personal equipment. I had records, emails, version histories. Diane from HR slid a contract across the table, her voice even. Your employment agreement is clear. Anything developed during your tenure belongs to the company. Not everything, I countered. System Sync interface was built before I joined Riverton. I licensed it to you, but the IP is still mine. It's in the original paperwork, signed by legal. Preston shifted in his chair. That was 10 years ago. Derek, the company's grown. System Sync has changed, too. Every update, every new integration is built on my original code base. I said, meeting his gaze. I'm not looking to burn bridges. I just want fair compensation for my intellectual property. Preston and Diane exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. We'll look into it, Preston finally said, his tone smoothing over any cracks. For now, please focus on ensuring a seamless transition to Nathan. I knew what that meant. They were stalling, hoping I'd just fade away quietly. But I'd spent too many years making myself indispensable to be erased so easily. The next morning, I logged in and found my access to the development servers revoked. An automated email landed in my inbox, dry and impersonal. Security protocol during transition periods. No explanation, no warning. Just like that, 11 years of trust and late nights reduced to a line in a policy manual. But I wasn't finished yet. Nathan called a team meeting and left me off the invite list. I found out anyway and walked in just as everyone was settling around the conference table. The air in the room sharpened at my arrival. Nathan's eyes flickered with annoyance before he smoothed his expression into something polite and practiced. Derek, glad you could join us. I was just outlining some changes to the network architecture. His tone was light, but there was an edge beneath it. The subtle warning of a territory being marked. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, making no effort to conceal my skepticism. Interesting, I said, letting the word hang. Which architecture exactly? Nathan didn't miss a beat, though I caught a brief tightening at the corner of his mouth. The main production floor systems. We're going to streamline the protocols, simplify where we can. I kept my voice even, forcing back the frustration. Those protocols are there for a reason. They prevent machine failures during peak loads. They're custom designed for our equipment. I watched as Nathan smiled when taught, the patience in his eyes thinning. Modern systems don't need such complex workarounds, he replied, as if I was the one stuck in the past. Vanessa, bless her, stepped in before I could escalate. They're not workarounds, Nathan. They're necessary adaptations for our hardware. Derek designed them after the 2018 system failure. Saved us from a full shutdown. Her words hung in the air, a subtle reminder of what was at stake. For a split second, the confidence in Nathan's posture wavered. Then he rallied, turning to the whiteboard with a dismissive finality. I appreciate the historical perspective, but we're moving forward with the streamlining. Just like that, I was written out of conversation, my input rendered obsolete, the rest of the day blurred by in a haze of frustration and unease. Later, legal pinged my inbox with a terse message. The company was asserting ownership of all systems, including my pride and joy, System Sync. They cited some obscure clause in my contract about integrated technologies defaulting to company property and dangled a $5,000 technology acquisition bonus, as if it were a generous favor instead of a slap in the face. The implication was clear. They wanted my work, not me. But things only snowballed from there. The next morning, whispers ran through my team. Nathan had booked one-on-ones with each of them, but these weren't friendly transition check-ins. They were full job evaluations, thinly veiled interrogations. I got a text from Luis, who'd always had my back. He asked if your systems were really necessary or if you just overcomplicated everything, trying to dig up dirt. I could feel the foundation shifting beneath me. Nathan wasn't just replacing me. He was undermining my reputation, sowing seeds of doubt among the people I'd led for years. That night, as I was sorting through my personal emails, I noticed a new message from one of our suppliers. They were confused about a licensing agreement Riverton had apparently sent over, one I'd never even heard of. My pulse quickened as I pulled up the contract. There was in black and white Preston's signature on a deal transferring all my custom-built supplier integrations to a third-party vendor. I recognized the company name immediately, Nathan's old college buddy startup. It hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just nudging me aside. They were systematically dismantling everything I'd built, selling it off piece by piece to their own allies. Desperate, I tried to access the backup servers to salvage the original code for System Sync, hoping to preserve at least a digital footprint of my legacy. My credentials were dead, locked out without warning. That's when it finally clicked. This wasn't a string of careless oversights or unfortunate timing. It was a coordinated setup, months in the making. Nathan had been studying my systems, learning their ins and outs, all while plotting to replace me and lay claim to my work. I realized I needed leverage, something to protect myself before they wiped me out completely. I reached out to Darren Phillips, an old friend from my early days in network security, someone I could trust to keep things discreet. We met at a weathered diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody knew or cared about Riverton or its internal politics. Over burnt coffee and greasy fries, I laid out everything. Nathan's maneuvering, Preston's backroom deals, the sudden push to erase my footprint. Darren listened intently, eyes narrowed. Legally, you're in a tight spot. They'll argue that everything you built on their clock is theirs. He paused, thinking. But why now? The company's numbers are strong. There's something else going on. I shook my head. That's what I can't figure out. The timing doesn't make sense. Darren offered to poke around. Not hacking, just following digital breadcrumbs, looking for a pattern. 2 days later, he called well past midnight. You need to see this. He'd been piecing together public records, SEC filings, and anything else he could find. Riverton's getting ready to sell, he explained. TechCore Industries, big manufacturing conglomerate from Boston, is about to buy them out. But get this. The sale price is tied directly to Riverton's tech infrastructure and the promise of new executive leadership. He paused, letting it sink in. They're cleaning house to boost the company's value for the acquisition. And your systems, System Sync in particular, are singled out in the valuation documents as a key differentiator. He wasn't finished. I dug a little deeper. Harrison Wells cashed out most of his shares last quarter. The real winners in this deal are Preston and the rest of the executive team. They get golden parachutes, cushy roles at TechCore. But here's the kicker. I found emails between Preston and Harrison dating back over 6 months. They'd already decided to replace you before Nathan was even hired. While you were pulling all-nighters fixing that security breach, they were quietly lining up your replacement. The realization came crashing down on me, heavy and cold. My late nights, the endless troubleshooting, the loyalty I'd shown, all of it had been taken for granted, or worse, exploited. I spent that night driving aimlessly, ending up at the abandoned industrial park where System Sync had been nothing more than a concept scribbled in a battered notebook. I sat in my car as the first hints of dawn crept over the skyline, replaying every decision, every misplaced trust. Back home, I dug through my old boxes until I found what I was looking for, a dusty external hard drive, relic of a time when I still believed in clean slates and fair deals. I plugged it in, hands shaking, and there it was, the original System Sync code, written and documented months before I ever signed on with Riverton. I scrolled through archived emails, my early exchanges with Preston, his own words acknowledging the system was mine, promising we'd formalize the ownership details once things settled down. I read it twice, 3 times, feeling a bitter mixture of vindication and betrayal. The next day, Nathan summoned me to a meeting with Preston and Diane from HR. No pleasantries, no pretense. Preston got straight to the point. We're accelerating the transition. Your last day will be next Friday. What should have been a 6-week handover was being chopped to 10 days. I looked at Diane. Any particular reason for rush? She didn't flinch. Nathan has demonstrated exceptional capability in taking over. And to be frank, Derek, your attitude has not facilitated a smooth transition. I sat there, absorbing the finality of it. My work, my team, my trust, all swept aside in the name of progress and profit. But this time, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I had proof of my ownership, of their duplicity, of the promises made and broken. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope, maybe just a sliver, but enough to remind me they could take my job, but not my story. Nathan looked at me, his gaze sharp and expectant. You'll need to finish all the documentation and training by Wednesday, he said, as if it were a simple task. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady and betraying nothing of what I felt beneath the surface. And what about the ownership of System Sync? Did you get a chance to look over the original agreements? I watched for any flicker of doubt, any sign he hadn't anticipated the question. Preston's jaw tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. Legal says every integrated system belongs to the company. The separation package is generous, Derek. You should take it. The way he said it made it sound final, as if the matter had already been settled in a boardroom somewhere far from my reach. I stood, refusing to let them see how deeply this cut. I'll have my lawyer look at everything, I said, my voice low but clear. Preston's eyes narrowed, calculating. Don't make this difficult. It won't change anything. The threat was unspoken, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. I didn't bother to respond. As soon as I stepped out of the conference room, I texted Luis. Plan B tonight. There was no other choice. I'd built System Sync from the ground up. Every line of code, every integration, every fix at 3 a.m. when production lines threatened to grind to a halt, and I wasn't about to let them erase me from my own creation. 7 hours later, under the jaundiced glow of a grocery store parking lot light, I met Luis. He was already waiting, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets. Without a word, he handed me a flash drive. Everything you asked for, he murmured, eyes scanning the empty lot for witnesses. Original code bases, deployment logs, authentication keys, full audit trail. I took the drive, feeling the weight of it like a talisman. Why are you helping me, Luis? I asked, searching his face for motive. He met my gaze, steady and unflinching. Because they think we're all disposable, he said simply. You're just first in line. The rest of us, Vanessa, Dare, and me, we're next if we don't protect each other. That weekend, my apartment became a war room. I pored over every file, rebuilding the story of System Sync. The original code, every late-night email with Preston, draft licensing agreements with my digital fingerprints all over them, timestamp commits that proved I was working on the core months before Riverton ever took an interest. I cataloged everything, annotated every file, building an ironclad case that couldn't be ignored, not even by the most aggressive corporate legal team. Monday arrived, the office bathed in the blue-white glare of strip lights. I got in early, but Vanessa was already at her desk, dark circles under her eyes. She barely looked up as I passed. You heard about the new timeline? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, settling into my chair. How's the team holding up? She shook her head. Not great. Nathan ran emergency planning sessions all weekend. Try to reverse engineer your monitoring system. It blew up on them. 3 production alerts got missed, and nobody saw it until it was too late. My heart thudded. Anyone hurt? No, but they had to shut down line 3 for 4 hours. Lost 40 grand. Easy. Nathan's furious. He's blaming the team, but everyone knows it's not their fault. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was seething. Sorry to hear that. She hesitated, eyes darting around. Derek, I think I'm next. Nathan's been asking if my job is necessary. He keeps calling meetings with HR. I'd suspected as much. Vanessa was too competent, too honest about the risks. The company didn't like people who saw through the glossy PR. Do you trust me? I asked quietly, leaning in. Without missing a beat, she nodded. I slid a sealed envelope across the desk. If anything weird happens this week, open this. It explains everything, what I've done, what you need to do. It's all there. She tucked it away without a word. We didn't need to say more. That afternoon, I met with 3 different patent attorneys, burning through my savings on rush fees. I filed provisional patents on the key modules of System Sync, the pieces that made it able to talk to aging manufacturing hardware, the adaptable control logic, the heartbeat monitor that kept the lines running even when the servers hiccuped. I didn't try to claim the whole thing, just the parts that mattered, the heart and soul of the system, the parts they couldn't do without. Tuesday was a blur of meetings and documentation. I finished every transition doc Nathan requested, attended his planning sessions, played the model employee. I smiled, nodded, offered suggestions. Meanwhile, Darren was helping me set up a secure off-site server. By midnight, my original code was backed up, and I'd built a standalone version of System Sync, one that owed nothing to Riverton, scrubbed their branding and integrations. If they wanted what I'd built, they'd have to come to me. Wednesday morning, as I sipped my coffee in the quiet before the office filled, a message from TechCore Industries landed in my personal inbox. The subject was simple: opportunity. Inside was an invitation to discuss a new role, one focused on industrial automation and system integration. Word had gotten out about my departure, and they wanted my expertise. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, then called TechCore's VP. We set a meeting for the day after my official exit. He didn't hesitate. A sign. They knew exactly what I could bring to the table. That night, I put my real plan in motion. Using the credentials Louise had salvaged, I updated 3 critical modules in System Sync. I added digital signature checks to flag any unauthorized changes, and set the software license to expire in 8 days, 1 day after my last day at Riverton. There was no sabotage, no backdoor, just a clear legal protection of my work, and a door left open for them to negotiate a proper agreement if they want to keep using it. I wasn't trying to burn bridges, but I wasn't going to be erased. Thursday, Nathan called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with a mixture of suspicion and resignation. Some folks say you've been acting strange, he said. Anything I should know about? I shook my head. Just focus on finishing up, making sure the handoff goes smoothly. He squinted, as if trying to see through me. We're changing all system passwords and credentials as soon as you leave. Standard procedure. Makes sense. I replied, keeping my tone light. Doesn't affect how System Sync runs, though. His frown deepened. What's that supposed to mean? Just that the system's designed to keep running, no matter who's admin. That's what makes it valuable. He searched my face for a threat, some sign of defiance, but I gave him nothing. After a moment, he gave up. I think we're good here. Legal will finish your paperwork tomorrow. As I left, Preston walked past me in the hall, eyes fixed ahead. 11 years of work, of late nights and last-minute saves, and he couldn't even look at me. That's all it came to in the end. By midnight, everything was ready. I sent a final encrypted message to my private server. Verification sequence Alpha 7 complete. The system would verify the license in 7 days. The countdown had begun. Friday morning, I turned in my badge, signed the exit paperwork, and ignored the forced cheer of the farewell lunch Nathan tried to organize. Preston looked relieved, maybe even grateful it was over. As I walked out to my car, my phone buzzed. Luis's name appeared on the screen. "It's done," he said quietly. "Nathan just changed all the admin passwords. Full system review scheduled for this afternoon." "Thanks," I replied, struggling to keep the tension out of my voice. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked back at the building, a place where I'd poured years of my life. Now just another set of glass doors closing behind me. "Now we wait," I said, but I knew I was done waiting for someone else to decide my future. This time, I held the keys. I spent the weekend barricaded inside my apartment, barely speaking to anyone. I let every unknown number ring through to voicemail, resisting the urge to check who might be calling. For once, I actually managed to sleep, a restless, uneasy kind of rest, but still better than the fitful hours I'd gotten lately. I woke up Monday morning with a dull sense of dread, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. At exactly 9:17 a.m., just as Riveting production floor was ramping up for the week, every system sync at all 3 facilities flashed the same cryptic message. "License expired. Please contact the developer to renew." The words glared at me from every terminal, every control panel, every workstation. Within minutes, confusion spread across the plant. Calls from the floor supervisors, frantic emails, alarms chirping as workflows stalled. By 9:20, the main assembly line ground to a standstill. By 9:45, the entire plant was silent, the hum of machinery replaced by tense murmurs and the metallic echo of inactivity. I was at my desk, sketching out a new network topology, trying to preemptively solve the bottlenecks I knew would come with the next round of upgrades. That's when Nathan walked in. He looked every bit the part. Pressed shirt, confident stride, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I straightened, bracing myself. He glanced at my whiteboard. "Interesting. Which architecture are we talking about?" I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my voice steady. "Depends. Which architecture are you looking to change?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "Main production floor systems. We're going to streamline the protocols. It's overdue." I could feel the tension in the room ratcheting up. "Those protocols are the reason we haven't had a catastrophic machine failure in 2 years," I replied, careful to sound factual, not defensive. "They're not just there for show. They're custom built for our equipment. Stuff you won't find in any off-the-shelf solution." Nathan's jaw tightened, his smile flickering. "Modern systems don't need all those complicated workarounds. We want something leaner." Before I could respond, Vanessa, who'd been quietly reviewing logs, spoke up. "They're not workarounds. They're necessary adaptations. Drerick designed them after the 2018 line crash. We'd be running blind without them." The air thickened with unspoken history. Nathan hesitated, scanning our faces, then shrugged as if dismissing the past. "History's nice, but we're moving forward with the streamlining." He turned a whiteboard and began outlining a new architecture, shutting us out of the process as deftly as he erased my diagrams. Later that afternoon, as I tried to piece together what had just happened, a curt email from legal landed in my inbox. The company was asserting full ownership of every system I built, including System Sync, citing a dense, rarely invoked clause about integrated technologies defaulting to company property. It was worded with the cold precision of a scalpel. They offered a $5,000 acquisition bonus, as if that was supposed to soften the blow, as if years of nights and weekends spent patching, building, and perfecting these systems could be bought out with single check. But the real blow came the next morning. Nathan had scheduled one-on-ones with every member of my team, ostensibly routine, but everyone knew better. These weren't transition meetings. They were job evaluations, the kind that made people nervous and quiet. Nathan was deciding who would stay and who would go, and everyone felt the weight of it. Luis texted me from the hallway, his nerves clear in the clip message. He asked if your systems were really necessary or just too complicated, trying to get me to say something bad. Nathan was fishing for dissent, hoping to find cracks in the team's loyalty, or at least someone willing to spin my work as a liability. That evening, as I was sifting through a mountain of unread messages, I found an email from one of our key suppliers, sent to my personal account. They seemed confused. Riverton had sent them a new licensing agreement for the supplier integration systems, but I'd never seen it before. My heart raced as I opened the attachment. The document was a legal handoff. Preston had signed away all the custom integrations I'd built for our suppliers to a third-party vendor. A quick search revealed the vendor was a startup founded by Nathan's old college classmate. That was the moment it hit me. They weren't just phasing me out. They were systematically dismantling everything I'd built, cannibalizing my work for profit, and parsing out to their own network. I tried to log into the backup servers to salvage my original code, but my credentials had already been revoked. Access denied. It was as clear as any spoken word. I was being excised, my legacy erased piece by piece, and the vultures were already circling. I realized then that this was no accident. They hadn't slipped up or underestimated me. This was a carefully orchestrated takeover, with Nathan as the inside man, brought in months in advance, quietly studying my systems, learning every nuance, preparing to replicate, replace, and ultimately erase me from the equation. Desperate for a lifeline, I reached out to Darren Phillips, a network security consultant I'd worked with on project years back. He was smart, discreet, and not afraid of getting his hands dirty. We met that night at a grimy little diner just off the highway, the kind of place where no one minded if you talked shop for hours, and where Preston would never dream of being seen. After I laid out the whole story, Darren sipped his coffee, brow furrowed. "Legally, you're in a bind," he said, voice low. "But something doesn't add up. The company's posting solid numbers. Why burn a bridge with a guy who keeps the place running?" I shrugged, feeling defeated. I wish I knew. All I've got are theories. Darren offered to take a look, just to gather information. Nothing shady, just some digging. Maybe something will shake loose. 2 days later, Darren called me well past midnight. "You'd better come see this," he said, urgency clear in his voice. When we met again, he showed me his findings, a series of recent SEC filings. Riverton was in the late stages of acquisition talks with TechCore Industries, a Boston-based conglomerate known for snapping up mid-sized manufacturing firms. The catch? The deal's value hinged on Riverton showcasing modernized, future-proof infrastructure and a leadership team eager for transition. Darren pointed to a line in the valuation document. "Your systems are front and center, especially System Sync. The proprietary manufacturing interface is one of the main selling points." He flipped to another page. "Harrison Wells cashed out last quarter. The acquisition is structured so that Preston and the executive team get golden parachutes, fat bonuses, cushy jobs at TechCore. The rest of you, expendable." But the thing that gutted me came last. Darren had managed to pull emails, internal discussions between Preston and Harrison, dating back more than 6 months. While I was staying up late, patching a security breach that nearly crippled the plant, they were already interviewing Nathan, plotting transition, mapping out how to remove me and take credit for my work. My loyalty had been nothing more than a convenience to them. That night, I drove out to the old industrial park on the edge of town, the place where years ago I'd first sketched the concepts that would become System Sync. I sat in my car for hours, staring at the darkened warehouses, replaying every decision, every late night, every moment I believed I was building something lasting. By the time the skies started to pale, I'd made up my mind. Back home, I rummaged through boxes in my closet until I found an old external hard drive. When I plugged it in, I felt a flicker of hope. There was my earliest version of System Sync, saved months before I joined Riverton. Documentation, too. Dated logs, diagrams, even email threads with Preston from my first weeks at the company. One exchange stood out. Preston specifically asked me to integrate System Sync and told me, in writing, that we'd sort out ownership once things settled down. The trust I'd placed in him now felt like a knife in my back. The next day, as I was reviewing the files, Nathan called me into a meeting with Preston and Diane from HR. The trap was set, but I wasn't coming in empty-handed anymore. "We're speeding things up," Preston said, voice clipped, eyes flicking over me like I was a spreadsheet error he was determined to fix. "No small talk, no preamble. Your last day is next Friday." Just like that, 6 weeks of transition shrunk to 2. I forced myself to keep my tone neutral. 2 weeks instead of 6, I pointed out. Any particular reason for the change? Preston's jaw worked. Nathan's proven himself, Diane interjected, her voice drained of warmth. And honestly, Derek, your attitude hasn't exactly made this handover easy. She didn't look at me, just at the stack of papers in her hand, as if she couldn't wait to file me away, too. I nodded. Got it, I said, swallowing the frustration. Nathan jumped in, eager, almost giddy with his new authority. We need all your documentation and training done by Wednesday. Sure, I said, steadying my voice, but inside I was already assembling my own checklist. What about system sync ownership? Have you reviewed the original agreements? Preston's expression pinched, the lines around his mouth deepening. Legal says everything integrated belongs to the company now. The separation package is generous. Take it. He sounded like he was reciting from a script, detached, transactional, as if the last 11 years meant nothing. I stood up. My lawyer will look through everything. Preston's eyes flashed a warning. Don't make this hard. It won't change anything. I left without another word, the click of the door behind me echoing like a gavel. In the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and texted Luis. Plan B tonight. 7 hours later, under the harsh glow of a grocery store parking lot security lights, Luis handed me a flash drive, his hands trembling a little despite his calm voice. Everything you asked for, he said quietly, glancing around. Original code, deployment logs, keys. I took it, feeling the weight of what we were doing settle in. Why help me? I asked, genuinely curious. He met my eyes, defiant, because they think we're all replaceable. His words hung between us, bitter and true. We both knew what it felt like to be valued only for what we could build, never for who we were. That weekend, I barely slept. My apartment became a war room. Laptop screens glowing late into the night. Sticky notes plastered on every flat surface. I cataloged everything. The earliest system sync code, emails with Preston detailing the project's infancy, licensing agreements with my name front and center, timestamp commits from before Riverton's first check cleared. Every document was a lifeline, proof that my work predated their claim of ownership. I wasn't just covering my tracks. I was building a fortress. Monday dawned gray and cold, fitting for what was coming. I arrived before anyone else. The office eerily quiet except for the hum of the HVAC. Vanessa was at her desk already, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a mug. You heard they're moving the timeline up? She asked, voice low. I nodded. How's the team? Not good. Nathan called emergency meetings all weekend. Try to reverse engineer your monitoring system. She leaned in, dropping her voice further. Didn't go well. 3 production floor. Alerts slipped through. My stomach tightened. Anyone get hurt? No. But they had to shut down line 3 for 4 hours. Lost 40 grand. Maybe more if they missed the next order. I kept my face blank. Forced empathy into my voice. Sorry to hear that. What I didn't say, they were about to learn what irreplaceable really meant. Vanessa hesitated, worry etched deep. Derek, I think I'm next. Nathan's been questioning if my job's even necessary. I'd seen it coming. She knew the systems inside and out, the kind of institutional memory they never valued until it was gone. Do you trust me? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Yes. I slid an envelope across her desk. If anything weird happens this week, open it. It explains everything. What I'd built, what they were risking, what she could do to protect herself. She tucked it into her bag without another word. That afternoon, I met with 3 patent lawyers, cycling between their offices in quick succession. Every meeting a blur of legalese and urgency. I paid extra for rush filings, provisional patents on the unique algorithms, the integration layers, the heartbeat monitoring that made systems sync indispensable to Riverton's factory floor. Not the whole system, just the innovations they couldn't replicate, the parts that mattered most. My work, in my name, protected as much as the law would allow. Tuesday, I hit every deadline, wrapped up the transition docs, sat through Nathan's meetings, fielded questions designed to trip me up. I played along, but my real focus was elsewhere. Darren, loyal to the end, helped me set up a secure offsite server. By midnight, all my original code was encrypted and archived, every version, every module. I built a standalone system sync, stripped of Riverton's branding, ready to deploy wherever I landed next. Insurance against whatever came after. Wednesday morning, an unfamiliar name pinged in my personal inbox. TechCore Industries. They'd heard I was leaving Riverton, wanted to discuss opportunities. Word traveled fast in this industry. Reputations once earned had a way of finding new doors open. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, then picked up the phone and called TechCore's VP directly. "Let's meet after my exit," I suggested. He agreed immediately, his tone eager. Someone was watching the chessboard, and I was already making my next move. That night, with the office nearly empty, I put Plan B into action. Using the access Louise had salvaged, I made 3 crucial updates to System Sync. Embedded digital signature checks to detect unauthorized changes, set the software license to expire 8 days out, just far enough past my last day to force a decision. No sabotage, nothing illegal. Just a clean legal boundary. If Riverton wanted to keep using my system, they'd need a new license. I wasn't burning bridges. I was building a toll booth, and I owned the road. Thursday, Nathan called me in. "Some folks say you've been acting odd," he started, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Anything I should know?" "Just focus on finishing," I replied, keeping my tone even. He watched me, searching for a threat. "We're changing all system passwords and credentials tomorrow after you leave. Standard procedure." "Makes sense," I said. "Won't affect System Sync's core operations." "Meaning?" "Just that it's built to run no matter who's admin." That's the beauty of it. He tried to read me, but I gave him nothing. "I think we're good," he finally said. "Legal will see you tomorrow for the final papers." On my way out, I passed Preston in the hall. He barely glanced at me, a faint nod, the bare minimum. 11 years boiled down to a moment of silence. By midnight, everything was ready. I sent one final message to my private server. Verification sequence Alpha 7 complete. The countdown had begun. All the pieces were in place. My word protected. My future unwritten but mine to choose. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Friday morning arrived with chill in the air, the kind that settles under your skin and makes everything feel more final. I handed in my badge, cool plastic, surprisingly light for something that had anchored me to that place for years. Signed the exit papers without ceremony, and declined the celebration lunch Nathan tried to organize. In truth, the idea of sitting through forced laughter and hollow toast felt unbearable. I could tell Preston was just as relieved to avoid as I was. The rituals of parting, I realized, rarely matched the reality. On my way to the car, my phone buzzed. Luis's name lit up the screen. "It's done," he said, his voice edged with tension and relief. Nathan just reset all the admin passwords. They're running a full system review this afternoon. I thanked him, careful to keep my tone steady, though inside I felt that old mix of anxiety and anticipation. "What now?" he pressed. "Now we wait," I replied. After months of planning and second-guessing, there was nothing else to do. That weekend, I retreated into solitude. I let the world's demands recede, ignoring calls from unfamiliar numbers, letting emails pile up unread. The silence felt strange at first, almost oppressive, but slowly it became a balm. For the first time in months, I slept deeply without dreams of code or deadlines, without the gnawing sense that something was about to go wrong. Monday dawned bright and unremarkable, but at 9:17 a.m., just as Riverton production floor was ramping up, everything changed. Every System Sync terminal in all 3 facilities flashed the same blunt message. License expired. Please contact the developer to renew. For years, the software had run quietly, invisibly, the nervous system of the entire operation. Now, with a few lines of code and a ticking clock, I'd cut the connection. By 9:20, the first assembly line stuttered and stopped. By 9:45, silence reigned. Machines idle. Workers milling about in confusion. Managers frantically making calls. At 10:30, Preston finally called me himself. His voice came through strained, trying for authority but thinly masking panic. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. I kept my tone measured, almost bored, as if we were discussing a routine system update. "I didn't do anything," I told him. "The license expired. As a developer and owner of System Sync, I'm open to talking about renewal." He sputtered, accused me of sabotage. I reminded him, Clause 7 from the agreement 11 years ago. Riverton had licensed the software, never owned it. I'd spent years being dismissed, my work taken for granted, the system treated as invisible infrastructure. Now, suddenly, its value was undeniable. He went quiet. I told him I'd already sent the new licensing agreement to his legal team. The terms weren't complicated. Formal recognition of my ownership, fair compensation for continued use, and a non-disclosure regarding my departure. He called it extortion. I called it business. For too long, I'd let others define my worth. Now, I was setting the terms. That's how it goes when leverage finally shifts. By 3 p.m., their lawyers had combed through paperwork. By 5, the deal was closed. Signatures exchanged with a sense of urgency I'd never seen from them before. The system would come back online, but on my terms this time. 3 days later, I sat in a sunlit conference room across from TexioR's VP of Operations, the city sprawling outside the windows. He slid a contract across the polished table. "We're still buying Riverton," he explained, "but we want you to lead the technical integration. Consultant, not employee." The offer was beyond anything I'd expected. Double my old salary, total control over my hours and location, an open runway to build something of my own. I'd spent years boxing by rules and hierarchy. Now, the freedom felt exhilarating and a little terrifying. "What about Nathan?" I asked, unable to help myself. The VP's face tightened. "Mr. Blake is moving on to other opportunities." The subtext was clear. In the end, the system's failure was too public, too costly. I signed the contract that afternoon, the pen feeling almost weightless in my hand. When I walked out of that office, I felt the future unfurling in front of me, uncertain, but finally mine to shape. 2 weeks later, Louise called with the news. Nathan had been quietly shown the door. The official story was a voluntary move to new opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. After the system crash, 3 major clients had threatened to leave, and someone had to take the blame. Preston, meanwhile, remained as CEO through the acquisition, but his power had evaporated. At TexioR, he was a figurehead, stripped of authority, his office relocated far from where real decisions were made. It was a strange fate for someone who'd always thrived on control. I didn't feel the rush of victory I'd once imagined. Not satisfaction or gloating, just a deep steadiness, a sense that I'd finally acted in accordance with my own value. For so long, I'd allowed others to dictate what I was worth, to treat the system I'd built as background noise. Now, I understood how crucial it was to protect your own creation, to draw boundaries and demand respect. A month later, the consulting check landed in my account, more than I'd ever seen at once. I drove out to the edge of the city and put a down payment on a small cabin by the lake. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Mornings, I'd sit on the deck, coffee in hand, watching sunlight ripple across the water. Evenings, the sky would turn gold and then indigo, the world quiet except for the calls of distant birds. For the first time in years, I had space to breathe. The team began to gather around me, slowly at first. 3 months in, Vanessa joined, bringing her sharp mind and steady presence. Then Louise, and soon others from my old department. This time, they weren't employees. They were partners. We built something together, free from the old hierarchies and unspoken resentments, creating systems on our own terms. We valued each other's contributions, understanding now how easy it is for vital work to go unseen until it stops. About a year after everything unraveled, I ran into Preston at a downtown restaurant. He looked older, lines etched into his face, suit rumpled, eyes shadowed with fatigue. For a moment, he turned away, then seemed to reconsider and approached my table. "You won," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes at first. I studied him, really studied him, for the first time in years. He had always seemed untouchable, but now he looked simply human. It wasn't about winning, I told him, my voice softer than I expected. It was about value, about recognizing your own worth, and not letting anyone take it for granted. He nodded, resignation etched in every line of his face, and walked out into the city night. I stayed there long after he left, watching as the city lights flickered on across the river, their reflections dancing on the water. I thought about the systems we build, at work, in life, the invisible structures that hold everything together until one day they break and reveal what really matters. Some systems fail, some are rebuilt, and a rare few endure because someone cared enough to protect them. In the end, it's not about who wins or loses, but about knowing what you built has value and refusing to let anyone forget it. They approached me with an offer I hadn't expected, lead to technical integration, but as a consultant, not as a full-time employee. The compensation? It was more than double what Riverton had ever put in my pocket. Freedom was part of the bargain, too. No clock to punch, no office politics, just results. I could work from anywhere, my kitchen table, a coffee shop, or anywhere that felt right. The flexibility alone was worth almost as much as the money. Still, I had to ask about Nathan. The VP's gaze hardened, just a flicker, but enough. Mr. Blake will be transitioning to other opportunities, she said, her tone clipped and rehearsed. The message was clear. He was out that afternoon. With a sense of inevitability, I signed the contract. It felt like closing a chapter, but not with a slam, more like quietly easing the door shut on a room I'd outgrown. 2 weeks later, Luis called to catch up, his voice lower than usual. Nathan was gone, let go quietly, no announcements, no goodbyes. Officially, he'd moved on, but everyone knew the truth. 3 of our largest clients had threatened to pull their business after one too many outages. The problems we'd warned about had come home to roost, and the company had no choice but to act. Preston, meanwhile, was still CEO on paper, but the acquisition had stripped him of authority. He'd been given an office, small, tucked away, symbolic more than functional. Most days, he just kept himself, a figurehead left behind by the tide. I expected to feel triumphant, to savor some sense of justice. Instead, I felt a steady calm, as if a weight I'd carried for too long had finally slipped off my shoulders. The satisfaction wasn't in Nathan's departure or Preston's sidelining, but in knowing I'd stood up for myself, insisted on being valued, and charted my own course. Within a month, my first consulting check arrived, more than I'd made in months at Riverton. I used it to put a down payment on a small cabin by the lake. It wasn't luxurious, but it didn't need to be. The deck stretched out over the water, perfect for watching the sun set in the evening or rise in the stillness before dawn. There, with only the sound of waves against the shore, I started to rediscover what it meant to feel peaceful, to have room to think. Word must have gotten around, because 3 months later Vanessa reached out. She'd always been sharp, adaptable, someone who made the impossible look routine. She joined my consulting team, bringing a fresh perspective and energy. Soon after, Louise came on board, and then others followed. Before long, half the department I'd left behind had joined me, not as subordinates, but as partners. We were equals, pooling our expertise, building something from the ground up. Decisions were made together, credit given where it was due. And for the first time in years, I felt part of a team that trusted and respected each other. A year passed. The consulting business thrived, and our reputation grew. One evening, I ran into Preston at a restaurant downtown. He saw me first, hesitated, then approached. "You won," he said, voice heavy with resignation. He looked older, his suit a little rumpled, the spark in his eyes dulled by exhaustion. I realized then how much the company had taken from all of us, not just me. It wasn't about winning, I replied, making sure he understood. It was about value, knowing what you're worth and refusing to settle for less. He nodded, a faint smile flickering before he turned away, lost in his own thoughts. After he left, I lingered by the window, watching the city's lights blink on across the river. I thought about the systems we design, both technical and human. Some are built to last, some are doomed to fail, and others change as we change, shaped by the people who care enough to make them better. I realized that Ultimately, everything comes down to value: what we create, what we protect, and what we demand for ourselves. And as the lights reflected on the water's surface, I felt a quiet confidence that whatever came next, I was ready.